No, I like convenience as much as the next guy. I like to carry tent stakes a lot of times because it saves me the time of sourcing material to kind of bushcraft those stakes myself. So, but you know, sometimes I don't want to carry those, or I need an extra stake, or I need a stake that's longer for conditions like up in the Adirondacks when there's a lot of snow. The little, 6-inch tent pegs that I carry sometimes aren't enough. So you may be in a position, or you may want to create your own tent stakes once you get to the location you're going to. So it's a very simple process. And what I like to do is just get some sticks that are about thumb thickness, maybe a little smaller. And this will actually create 2 stakes. I like to make them roughly, 12 inches or so, longer depending on what type of conditions you're in. If you have really muddy conditions, you'd want to have a longer stake that you can get down into that mud and it'll hold better. If you've got deep snow, that's another great technique to use, is a longer tent stake. So we're going to fall back on some of the skills that I showed on the tri-stick video, and you'll be able to get another look at what those are used for practically. So first thing I'm going to do is cut this to length, and if I have a saw available, then obviously, that's the easiest way to go about it. So I'll just kind of estimate about where the halfway point is, and I can saw those in half. Roughly the same length. If I didn't have a saw, what I could fall back on is the rose cut or beaver chew, if you remember that from the tri-stick video. So selecting the halfway point or so, what I'm going to do is come in and I'm going to start slicing in one direction all the way around. Once I get around once, I'll continue around a second time. This time I'm going in a little bit deeper. And I'll go around a third time, going just a little deeper until it pops off. Let me retrieve that. And you can see what I'm left with looks like a rose. So that is why they call it a rose cut. And what's good about the rose cut is I've not only cut it to length, but on the other side I've already started my pommel end or crown. So I can go in and trim that off. And I'm good to go on that stake. And I'll just continue on with this one. So I've got the crown end on the top. And when you're making stakes, you always want to crown the top of it off. Because if you think about it, when you're hitting this with your billet or your hammer, whatever you're doing to drive it into the ground, you want that to be focused here and not on the edges. Because if you don't crown those off, a lot of that pressure from banging on those tent stakes ends up on the edge and it'll start splitting that wood away. So you'll split your tent stakes. Rather than focus it at that single point, all this is kind of moved out of the way, and if you will, it's moved out of the way so it only hits up here and it doesn't hit those side pieces and shear them off. So that's why I always like to crown those. Come down to the other end, and it's just going to be a simple point. And for this one, I think I'll show you a knee lever grip. Knee lever grip again, pin it there, pull the material in a slice. All the way around, rotate the material after you take each piece off. And I can come up to a chest lever grip and really sharpen that point. There we go. So I've got my pommel end or my crown, and I've got my point down here. Now I want to create a stake notch. Right? You remember this from the tri-stick video. A stake notch is the simple version of a 90-degree latch notch that allows you to have a recess for your cordage. So because I'm using a fixed blade knife this time, what I can do is make a quick stop cut. I only want to go about down to the center core, maybe about down to the pith. So I'll make that stop cut real quick right here. And all I have to do is carve towards that stop cut at an angle, come back in, trim it off. And I'm going to keep doing that until I get down to where I can see the heartwood or the center pith, depending on what type of wood you're using. Two or three good shavings, and I can either trim it with my knife or hit it with the baton again. And I've just gotten to where I can see that center pith. So I'm going to stop right there. Clean up that angle. Not that that's that critical, but it's good practice. You can see I've got that 90 degree right there and an angle going down into there. That's a simple stake notch. Now if I were to create an actual 90 degree latch notch, I would need another flat plane inside that before I began that angle down. So this would be a lot more pronounced. It would come down to an angle and go at a 90 degree for a while, and then hit this 90 degree and come up. So that's the difference between those two notches. The simple stake notch, all I need is a recess for my cordage. So that is my tent stake, crowned end, stake notch, and a point. So I'm going to create, 6 to 8 more of those.